a chance to review the minutes. Are there any objections, edits, or changes that people would like to bring up for the minutes? If not,
The only thing very quickly I wanted to bring up, and Bob's not here, but for anyone who does have presentations, now that we saw this when we put the minutes out this time, we can put links in there. So I'm happy to put slides from anyone's presentations or anything like that in the official minutes as well if they send them to me if they do presentations.
Embedded PDFs and all that, that's really, it's great until I try to work with them to update the previous months into this month's and fall down the well. So with that, I'd like a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have one?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second?
The microphone. Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
So by acclamation, the minutes are approved. Next agenda item is organizational issues, and I am thrilled to say that we have nobody leaving, nobody coming, and the major organizational issues will be one of the main body topics for our conversation today, and that is the organization of our student intern program. Anybody else want to bring up? There is one other organizational issue. First time without plexiglass in 3 years. And that, unless there's somebody else that has a comment about organization or something they'd like to bring up, I'll bring up the next, which is community infectious diseases follow-up. And I'm happy to report that at this point, we don't have anything really to talk about with regard to SARS-CoV-2, influenza, RSV, and we're moving out of that season, fortunately, but I would remind people to have awareness of arthropod vector diseases, tick-borne and mosquito-borne diseases, and so that and we do have endemic Lyme, we do have endemic babesiosis, and we do have endemic deer and field mice. And so when you are in a situation where you might have exposure to field mice or deer or ticks, precautions should be made, and people should watch for that. And fairly shortly, we will start to have mosquito-borne illnesses to be concerned about, including West Nile, Rocky Mountain spotted. I think those have been the two biggest the last couple of years. So perk up your ears and be aware of standing water in your gardens. And one thing I do in my garden is I apply BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, completely benign treatment. It's also good to keep away Japanese beetles, but anywhere where water might accumulate, you can buy granules, you can buy dunks, you can buy actually solutions, and if you have places in your yard where water might accumulate and you can't keep it dry, then I recommend applications of Bacillus thuringiensis. It's really, really easy. They're mosquito dunks. You can get them in any garden store. So.
Could I make one quick comment?
Of course, please.
Rocky Mountain spotted fever is tick-borne.
Thank you. Any other comments on communicable diseases? Okay, with that, let's move to old business. Kiki, you want to give us an update on the participation follow-up from, I guess, the March meeting?
I actually spoke with Adam, and in light of last month's meeting, I don't think I did justice to his program, so I would like to ask that he be added to June's minutes or June's agenda, and he could just give a brief PowerPoint demonstration on what his program covers, and that would be a lot more concise.
Fine with me, unless there's objection. We'll add to the minutes that we'll invite him back for another discussion of the programs for addiction prevention and overdose prevention. Right? that-
Yes,
Okay, very good.
thank you.
I have, those who pay attention might notice that I have dropped a couple of the older items that I think we've closed out from old business, most specifically, notably the animal ordinances, which essentially have shifted into the hands of the Board of Commissioners and Maggie and the council to bring up, so we really don't have any business there. However, we do have Alex, who would like to talk to us about the ongoing issue of food inspection practices, which we talked about last month, and which Alex has some recommendations for us. So to you, Alex.
Yeah, so I did the ride-along that I'd been working out with the Delaware County Health Inspector. So our inspector for Radnor Township is now Samantha Cooper. There are other inspectors who may operate within the township from time to time, but she's the person who primarily covers our territory. So I did 2 inspections with her. Wasn't anticipating anything because I've been reading the reports and they all look very thorough, but she's certainly doing a very thorough job on her inspections. I also submitted a kind of summary report of what's been going on with the inspections for the calendar month of April. If people are finding it helpful, what I'd like to do is submit something that kind of looks like that every month, and then, after doing that for a few months, we can kind of revisit whether people are finding it useful or not, or how that looks. Kind of the main things that I did want to highlight from that report, and I put them as the particular highlights from that report. We did have 2 places that had perfect inspections with 0 violations, which is very hard to do. So shout outs to the Wayne Senior Center and Capri Water Ice. We did also have 2 restaurants that resulted in the facility needing to be scheduled for a reinspection, even though the inspection that was generating a follow-up was itself a follow-up, so they're on their second follow-up. And then there was also 1 restaurant that they identified. There was a change in ownership that resulted in the facility operating without a license. When they went to do their review, they noted that, and the owners actually voluntarily shut down until they got the proper licensing, which they were back up after a couple of days. And that report said that they're good to resume operations, which they have resumed at this point. And then I also took a tour of the office for the new Delaware County Health Department. Marie said to say hello to everybody. They have some great programming that they're doing, including I got to meet the person who's actually handling the mosquitoes for the county now. They're doing lots of collecting and testing and sending in samples. They actually do also have a program for Narcan now. They have some programs that they're doing for the LGBTQ community, and most significantly, they have launched a community health assessment, which I sent to Maggie and requested if the commissioners could send that out in their letters. Basically, it's a survey. It's an opportunity for residents in the county to have their voices heard with regards to programming that they might like to see. If there are minority or marginalized communities, it's a chance for them to have their voices heard about programming or services that might be needed that might not typically be identified. It's a chance for Radnor residents to have concerns that we have in our community identified. I know that they are hoping to get 3,000 responses, which for the entirety of Delaware County is actually a little bit on the small side. I think since it's the first time they're doing it, they're starting with a smaller goal. But certainly residents are encouraged to, fill that out, sort of like the census. The better information that we have, the better services can be provided.
Start in with, I actually hear 4 different issues that you've raised. Number one is the survey, and thanks for bringing that to our attention, and whatever we can do to get people to participate. I think anything like that, the more participation, the more likely it is to result in a good thing. Number two is an A and a B, I guess, and that is that the services, I wonder whether it might not be valuable to bring in somebody responsible from the county to go over services that formerly were township services and are now county services, so that we have an idea of what that looks like. And I don't think that's urgent, and if we can get it in June, if not, we can put it in September. But to just go over that, and the thing that struck me there was the insect spraying, and it's a couple years ago now, when there was a broadcast bulletin for a plan to do significant spraying, and we kind of intervened, the Board of Health intervened, because it did not appear that the risk of undertaken by broad spraying was up to the benefit regarding the risk involved. So if you have established that contact, I wonder if we could stay in contact with the county officer responsible for that kind of spraying, because I think that there's never a right answer. There's always a balance of risks and benefits when it comes to applying toxins for the prevention of toxicity.
Yes, and actually, I forgot to mention this, but Samantha did say that she would be open to coming to one of our meetings at some point to kind of talk to us directly. I think that'll be after our summer break, but
Not possible for us to get her in June?
in
anticipation of the insect season.
That was what it sort of sounded like in terms of what her timeline might be.
Right. But if we could keep in touch with her, because I think it's often a sensitive issue. And then the last question I have for you is, what would you like to do with regard to moving forward the food inspection story? Should we have it as a standing old business follow-up item?
Yeah, I think that would be good. I'm, happy to, as I did this month, kind of prepare a report that looks something like that, and maybe I can play around with the format, or if people have suggestions about things they might like to see that aren't on there, and then basically just sort of submit that, but go over kind of whatever the highlights are at the meeting.
Sounds perfect. I'm happy to hear that we don't really have anything going on in Radnor that mirrors apparently some of the things that have gone on in a couple of the other townships with regard to the schism between the townships and the county. But to this point, we feel that we've gotten good and appropriate service, and that we continue to have appropriate surveillance of food safety in the township, right?
Yeah, and the only point I would make about that is, I know, Maggie, one of the points you had brought up last time was that one of the concerns some of the other municipalities had was about frequency of inspections. So I would make 2 points about that, one of which is that the thoroughness of inspections is obviously very critical as well, and the inspections that the county is doing, from what I can see, both from the ride-along and also from the reports, are very thorough. The other thing is that while they have different categories for frequency of how often they're inspecting, everybody's getting inspected at least once a year, but that's also if they pass that first inspection. If they get a follow-up, then essentially they keep getting follow-ups every month until they pass. There are also procedures for, shutdowns after a certain number of follow-ups. They also have to start paying to get re-inspected after, I believe it's after their second follow-up. Any subsequent follow-ups, they have to pay to get re-inspected. So
To summarize, you get inspected once a year at least. If you don't completely pass, you have further
well,
stages.
so it's not completely pass. There's different categories. There are some things that are corrected on site. There are also things that are violations, but they're not serious enough violations to warrant a follow-up.
And what
so-
happens if a complaint is precipitated from the
Oh,
public?
if a complaint is precipitated, then they get an inspection, as long as, the complaint is, what's the
Reasonable.
opposite of meritless, meritful? With merit.
Bearing merit, okay.
Bearing merit.
Okay, excellent. Thanks an awful lot, Alex. And anything else under old business? Anything that I missed in the agenda under old business? In the absence of a positive response, I'll take that as a negative. And with that, we move to the highlight of our meeting this year, and that is our student intern program presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa and our interns.
All right, so Khadijah and Ray, I'd suggest going up, and your slides are supposed to be loaded right now. So I think they should be good. There you go. We'll have time for questions afterwards.
Is it just on? I assume it is. First off, I'd like to thank the board for helping us out this year. It's been a pleasure to come, listen, and to do this project. So the basis of our project this year was to focus on drowsy driving. So I feel like it's a very overlooked aspect of high school, especially with all the stress, social obligations, classwork. I feel like while we might not be able to actually affect it, at least maybe bring awareness to the problem would help some people to maybe fix some patterns to stop them from driving and causing dangerous situations. So we just have some basic outlines of what we kind of researched throughout the year.
Introduction. Sleep deprivation is a common problem among high school. Sleep deprivation is a common problem among high school students, which can have serious consequences when it comes to driving. According to the National Sleep Foundation, drowsy driving causes an estimated 100,000 crashes seen each year in the United States. In this presentation, we'll explore the effects of sleep deprivation on high school drivers, including statistics, causes, and potential solutions.
Hey, once again, I want to reiterate how looked over drowsy driving is, since in school at least we tend to mainly talk about texting and driving or possibly drunk driving, but especially among the juniors and seniors that do drive, I think the dangers of driving in itself is very overlooked, and sometimes driving is seen as a game to some students rather than actually something that could cause life or death injuries. So I just want to say that the gravity of drowsy driving from my research seems to be in parallel to something along the lines of drunk driving, which is obviously very, very dangerous.
So we researched a bunch of statistics, and we came up with that there are, like, in every 25 adult drivers reports having fallen asleep at the wheel in the past 30 days. Among high school students, the numbers are even more concerning. A study by the American Sleep Foundation for Traffic Safety found that 31% of teens reported driving while drowsing in the past month. These statistics highlight the need to increase awareness among the dangers of drowsy driving, particularly among high school students who may be more likely to engage in risky driving behaviors.
And throughout the year, we tried to conduct some small-scale student surveys. And from just talking to a group of different groups of students, it seems that around at least half of them, in some point or another, have noticed that either they have difficulty focusing or frequent blinking while driving, possible daydreamings or disconnected thoughts that aren't related to focusing on the roads, trouble remembering the past few minutes or miles driving, or street signs, lights, etc., yawning or rubbing their eyes while in the middle of driving, trouble keeping their head up, or possibly from being tired, drifting from lane to lane. So it's pretty evident that at least in certain groups of students that their tiredness, which possibly is affected from school, is clearly affecting the way they drive.
We also researched that about 7% of all collision and approximately 16.5% of all fatal collisions are thought to be the result of drowsy driving. What's worse, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration recently revealed data showing a dramatic increase in fatal collision. There isn't like a breathalyzer like equivalent that can be used on site to show the numbers of how many people get into crashes due to drowsy driving, like you can see the statistics with drunk driving. So it's like put on the responsibility of the drivers, their passengers, and other witnesses to report if they witness that the driver was fatigued or passed out. So it's not always clear to see.
Hey, so we've already gone over some of the main causes, but I can just go through them again. Especially among high school students, the main factors I think would contribute to a higher degree of drowsy driving would be earlier start times, while Radnor has done a good job to fix that with the high school's later time. Extracurricular activities, part-time jobs, and social obligations. So in addition with using electronic devices at night, the blue light can cause different sleep patterns that also further causes drowsy driving. So I think it's more important that the school, I think, reiterates how important it is to get 8 to 10 hours of sleep, since at least for me, I try my best to, but it is very hard to keep that in mind with a lot of distractions going on. So I just think that we need to make a more stronger emphasis on the importance of just a basic 8 to 10 hours of sleep.
So obviously high school students face a lot of pressure to perform well academically, and with the increase of schoolwork and high expectations from parents, teachers, peers, the stress levels can really skyrocket. This has a dangerous consequences when it comes to driving. Studies have shown that stress and anxiety can impair a driver's ability to make quick decisions and react to situations on the road. And in addition to the mental effects of stress, physical symptoms such as headaches, fatigue, muscle tension can also impact a student's driving abilities. And when combined with sleep deprivation, these factors can create a perfect storm for accidents and other dangerous situations on the road.
So for increased stress among seniors, more so than other high school students, I think just, at least me personally, the stress within Radnor of college application did affect my sleep schedule. You always hear about different rankings in prominent schools does play a big role into the way you think during that November, at least the fall time period. So from some students that we've interviewed about this problem, one student said, attending a competitive school like Radnor, it can get difficult to keep up with the schoolwork and extracurriculars, resulting in endless sleepless nights. While another said, there are times where I felt that I didn't have much time to be able to balance assignments, work, college applications, etc. And sleep just didn't feel like an option. So at least for myself, and apparently these students too, just for seniors, balancing a healthy social life, sleep, work, and college applications has been very detrimental to our sleep schedule and to obviously the problem of drowsy driving.
So we want to reiterate the effects of drowsy driving. Drowsiness can impair reaction time, judgment, and decision-making abilities, making it more difficult to avoid accidents on the road. In addition, drowsy driving can lead to microsleeps, which are brief periods of unconsciousness that can last for several seconds. And microsleeps can occur without warning, making it nearly impossible for drivers to react in due time.
So for me personally, one aspect of this problem that I thought was pretty interesting was how does sleep affect reaction time when it comes to driving or just in general. So according to studies, sleep deprivation can significantly decrease a driver's reaction time and obviously brain function slower. and is not able to process information as quickly as it were if it was rested, which means that obviously it's drivers that are drowsy do not react as quickly as it does when they're normal to things that come out to the road. So in fact, research has shown that being awake for 18 hours straight can have the same effect on a person's driving ability as having a blood alcohol concentration of 0.05%, which is just below the legal limit of 0.08%. But that still means that the driver, while driving sleep deprived, is almost as dangerous as a driver under the influence.
Fortunately, there are some steps that can be taken to reduce the risk of drowsy driving among high school students. One solution is to educate your students about the dangers of drowsy driving and encourage them to prioritize sleep. Schools can also consider adjusting times and prioritizing later times for high school students, like Radnor has done. In addition, technology can also play a role in preventing drowsy driving. Some cars now come equipped with systems that can detect when a driver is becoming drowsy and provide alerts to keep them awake on the road.
So then some very specific things that we could do is just put sleep first, reiterate to students and also adults that 8 to 10 hours of sleep is very necessary to being a safe driver on the roads. Asking for rides is a big thing among students, so I think it's important that students ask for rides when they feel like they need it and they don't feel obligated to drive themselves when they're tired. And also for students that are carpooling other younger students to school, that they don't feel obligated to drive while tired, which could endanger themselves or whoever they are driving. And also to take power naps throughout the day, since after a long day of school, it might be super taxing to get in the car without any extra needed rest and going on the road and possibly causing an accident.
In conclusion, the effects of sleep deprivation on high school drivers are significant and cannot be ignored. By raising awareness about the dangers of drowsy driving and taking steps to promote healthy sleep habits, we can help reduce the number of accidents caused by drowsy driving among high school students. Ultimately, it's up to all of us to take responsibility and steps for our own safety and the safety of others on the road. And by working together, we can create a safer environment for all. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
Stay
Don't
out there
leave.
because we might
There
have
are a
some
couple
questions for
things.
you.
First, you should stand up and take any questions that might come up.
Any questions?
Well, I have a question that you may not know the answer to. Jenny may know a little bit better. How long has the change in the sleep times been the case? Has it been about 5 years?
I think it's 4 years. My freshman year coming in is when they switched it over.
2019.
Okay, excellent. So right
4
before kind
years,
of
yeah.
pandemic. So it's hard because you guys weren't, I would love to maybe talk to the high schoolers, the 4 years before you and you guys as far as
Yes,
the
what would you like to
difference.
ask them? They didn't change it in time for me.
Yeah, so, looking at normal teenage sleep schedules, I would imagine that certainly that change in start times. I think Lower Merion right now is looking at changing start times as
Yeah.
well. The issue, I feel, is that although that may help with the drowsy driving, I think overscheduling is kind of even more of an issue with students because you're, you start your extracurriculars, but then you start them later in the day
Yeah.
because you went to school earlier. And I don't know if the school has added activities before school, given that there's a later start or not. Are there generally activities before school or not really?
I mean, for swimming,
Swimming.
we have morning practices. I think I can talk about the switch between, since we had med careers this year, both of us. So naturally, I had to jump from, let's say, I wake up at 8:10 and get to school versus now I have to wake up at 6:30 and get in the car. So especially, as I said, during college applications, I'd be up to 12, 1 o'clock writing my essays before deadlines hit. And then I'd still need to get that's only 5.5 hours of sleep before you're right back up driving to Bryn Mawr to get to class. So I think the jump in time is a big difference. That extra 2 hours right there is what you need for a great day.
I mean, I think that this was a great topic to choose, and I was, yeah, I mean, I thought it was great even when I saw it on your application when you initially applied. Was there like a particular thing that happened that gave you the idea for this project, or?
Yeah. I don't know if I want to say it. I think it's kind of bad. So over the summer, I was at the beach with my friends, and I kind of stayed up the whole night, and then I drove home, and then that drive home was kind of like, it was a bad drive home. But we got home safe, but just like I kind of realized it's kind of just like a very eye-opening experience that driving with little or to no sleep is not a smart idea.
So when I was in your shoes, seatbelts were optional. There were no airbags. Most of the ashtrays were full, and people went to 3 martini lunches. So driving is substantially safer now than it used to be, and in no small part as a consequence of community action. It feels to me like the number one thing here that you might be able to convert from an observational study into action is there something we can do just to raise awareness? Because that's really kind of what you said. Before you get behind the wheel drowsy, think about it. Just like before you get behind the wheel after a couple beers. You should do more than think about it, because that'll end you in jail. But is there something that we can do with Jenny representing the school board for us here? Is there something we can do to increase awareness?
So I can definitely talk a little bit to that. One of the things we can do off of this, and I have Ms. Kevgis here as well, we can look into our curriculum, in our health and wellness curriculum, and we would probably want to start that probably as early as middle school, because sometimes people have to hear things several times before it kind of comes into play. But utilizing some of those statistics, it would be something that we could definitely do. 7th, 8th, 9th grade, I'm trying to remember. Typically, it's like sophomores is when they start getting permits, and then they're driving as juniors, and they're allowed to park at the high school as seniors. Kept getting the whole thing down here. So yeah, definitely looking at it, but starting years earlier, and then really hitting it hard as they come into high school would probably be the best way to do that.
Yeah.
And we do have curriculum meetings that we have, and this is something that Mrs. Kevgisk and I can definitely take back and let them know it's something that we should be looking into.
I think that'd be a great idea, since people tend to remember a lot from those health classes. So just like a quick, even if you're just tired, like it'd probably flash in your mind at that point, and at least that give them the moment to make a better judgment call. I think that's a great idea.
I just think like another solution would be like parents talking to their children about it, and like really reinforcing and emphasizing the dangers of drowsy driving. Yeah, I think it's like the community like as a whole that has to take steps in place to fix the problem.
So I think making this a even more impactful project would be something you could be very proud of. Thank you very much. Can you put the title up again? Because I thought that was a pretty slick title. Yeah, excellent. Very nice presentation. Thank you. And Lisa and Alex would like to talk to you guys.
Were there other questions, or was that?
Are there other questions, comments, concerns, considerations? No.
So we have certificates of appreciation that we're presenting both of you with, and after the meeting, we'll also be happy to take pictures if you want in front of the flags or anywhere in the building, for LinkedIn or anything like that. But great job.
Because we all know it didn't happen if there's not a picture on your iPhone. Okay.
Thank you.
Mrs. Kepkis wants a picture? All right, so should we do?
So I think
Just take a big, one big picture right here.
Yeah, and then one big picture. Right, this is
I had a quick thought. I don't know if there's any literature that comes out when you get your senior parking pass or whatever, but just a quick little flyer about the dangers of being sleep deprived that went when they get their little parking pass could be a good way to give, hit them when you're getting the pass.
Thank you both. So the other part of the agenda for the student intern program, I'm going to turn back to Alex, who with Lisa and Seth has been putting together the guiding principles for the project and the changes that we might like to make in terms of trying to constantly improve and upgrade the programs that we do. So Alex, to you.
Yeah, so I think we had a lot of good progress after the last meeting. To the point where we actually, I think, we did include it in the end with the agenda, at least a draft document. So I did get some more feedback since then. Under section 2A, subsection 1, it is missing the word supervisor after the word intern, which was good clarification. And then I also got some feedback from Andrew that I thought was good feedback on a rewording of the mission statement, essentially putting the goal first and kind of combining a couple of sentences so that it reworded, it would read, student interns will develop and execute an evidence-based health wellness related project, providing an enriching experience for students and our community. Each academic year, the Board of Health selects students to actively serve as student interns. The interns are directly exposed to the health-related issues of the township and service liaisons between the Board of Health and the adolescent community. And then Seth also made a couple of good points under 4C3 to put a point about the students being notified about both the schedule of the meetings and also the fact that because of our meetings being on Mondays, they can sometimes get rescheduled to a different day to accommodate a holiday or just other kind of township business.
Alex, maybe also something about attendance is, at the Board of Health meetings is part of the,
Okay, yeah.
not
That's a good
requirement, but
point as well.
obligation of being an intern.
An opportunity and an obligation.
And then also, basically that I had left in a sentence from under 6A2 about the students selecting, or the topics, or working with the board to select topics, which was sort of under the old model that we had proposed, but wouldn't really be relevant under the kind of the current model that we're proposing of having the board essentially decide on some topics to offer to the students. And then the other point that Seth made, which I hadn't put in there because this sort of requires the board being on board for this, but that the timeline that I had put in was really based on kind of starting the whole cycle of things in September. But if everybody is pretty much on board with, obviously we have a few edits here, but if everyone's on board with kind of the overview of what we've laid out, that we would really like to try and get the topics that we're going to be pitching to the students next year nailed down at the June meeting, if everybody's comfortable taking the time between now and the June meeting to kind of work on projects that they might like to offer to the students for next year, so that that way we can get some of that together over the summer rather than not starting that until September. So I don't know, Drew or Seth, if either of you have any comments on, I sort of spoke for you both a little bit there in terms of the feedback that you'd given to me. But that is kind of where things are.
Could I make a couple of quick points? Did you mean under 1B1, did you mean March or did you mean May?
I actually meant June.
Oh, well.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah, because I think that, I think maybe May is the right month, because that's when we aim for.
Yeah, they're usually still available in May. It was June when seniors,
Ah,
we found them to
I
not
see.
be available.
Got
But
it.
yeah, so I
So-
don't know how I ended up with March there, but
Yeah, I
thank you
don't
for
know either.
catching that.
And then there was one typo. On, oh, hold on, geez, what section am I in? 4, C, 5, E, 1. You have, why the student wants a position, da, 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 da. Anyway, you have withing instead of within.
Thank you.
Yep, no, that was an easy one. And otherwise, I thought the content was great. I also picked up the supervisor not being there. But, and we don't really address anywhere specifically. At one point, you say that these students have to live in Radnor. But nowhere do we really address, other than you said you wanted it on the township website, which I think is great, but that you could easily get an applicant from Carroll or, and do we want to be sending this to the guidance counselors at other high
So
schools?
we did discuss this, and where we landed is the trick there is that there are other private schools that operate within Radnor that have students who both live and do not live in Radnor Township. We also have schools that are not in Radnor Township that may have students who live in Radnor Township, and that just from a logistic standpoint, tracking all of that down would be a little bit hard and also might create some confusion among, we might get applications from students who then, go to school at one of those schools in Radnor, but they don't live in the township, so they're not really eligible, and it just, from a logistical standpoint where we
Well, you
kind of
make it pretty
decided
clear
to-
they have to be Radnor Township
we
residents.
made it clear that they need to be Radnor Township residents. Where we decided to leave it from an advertising perspective essentially is that we would put it on the township website. We will advertise specifically in the Radnor Public Schools because we know that those are all Radnor residents. But then if we get applications from private school students who, regardless of where their school is, if they live in Radnor Township, they are eligible, and we will consider those applications as well.
So I have a couple of questions. It feels like the committee's decided that we will have individual students, individual projects, and that we will no longer have collaborative projects. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much we discussed that as busy as the students are, it's kind of more helpful to try to do one-on-one. But however, there could be extenuating circumstances. If somebody has an idea for a project that both students are interested in,
So you have-
and,
Yeah, and I did also just want to, that was part of why I retitled this from procedures to guiding principles, is that we're not, this is not anything that we're laying down in stone or as, a law of Radnor Township. These are, guiding principles that we're using to guide us on the student intern project, not
if-
something that we can't adjust as needed if we need to go along.
If one of the brilliant topics that one of the board members comes up with is so appealing to two different students and they care to work together, I think that we should be amenable to that, because I hear from a logistic point of view that probably it's easier to get the focus on the project as an individual than have to coordinate two challenging schedules. But I also think that there's a value in learning teamwork in projects, and if we can accommodate that, I think we should continue to accommodate that if circumstances permit.
And also, also leaving things open to two board members working together on one project as well, if it's, something that two board members want to collaborate on.
So, yeah, I guess the clarity there, that if one of the board members has an idea that's so intriguing to another board member, they want to contribute to the mentoring in that project, I think we should be open to that, yeah?
Correct, or, we have 2 mental health experts on our board now. I don't know if, they might want to collaborate on something,
Right.
If.
Yeah, so we have a broad
Lisa had some
array of
thoughts on Bob's
expertise. And
presentation the last time, there are overlapping areas of interest for sure.
So there are 2 other things that I would bring up. One is that although theoretically we could have as many as 9 projects, I think we might not want to move that quickly in that direction. And I think that although this is one of the crown jewels of the Board of Health program, we do have other business, and I believe that the work involved at the meetings, an hour a month is not a lot to start with, grows not arithmetically but exponentially when you start to add moving pieces. So I think we need to be a little careful in the number of projects.
And I think we did put 2 students as the goal number to pick, so, in here. Yep.
And then there's something that I'm going to, boy, I hate to be a buzzkill, but I'm going to be. And I'm actually going to throw it to Maggie to be the buzzkill. And that is something that we haven't really taken up, and that is risk to the township, risk to the supervisees as a consequence of risk to the students, and indemnification, which we have not up till now undertaken, but as we're kind of raising the polish and shine, as we are in a period of hyperpolarization, strong opinions, litigiousness, I think that it is something that we do need to pay attention to. Maggie, you want to address that?
I don't know how I can address it. I wish it didn't exist. But I think that the best thing is I'll just see if I can't talk to our council and see, how they feel about, this is obviously a volunteer position that you're doing up there, and what the risk of liability is. I really don't know, but I can certainly confer with John Rice.
Perfect, thank you. So any other comments, questions, concerns? So this will be another significant topic for our June meeting. And we are asking that people come to the June meeting prepared to offer up topics if they think they have topics. Should we consider doing some of that work offline? People can develop them, and the problem is when you share as a board as a whole, it has to be publicly posted.
I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong if we wanted to have, anybody who's identified that they and another board member are going to be pitching something at the meeting, for them to send that to, I guess, either yourself or myself, so that it would go out with the agenda prior to the next meeting, that those are kind of the projects that are being pitched. It's just that we can't send out, it's not that we can't send out a board-wide email, we just can't send out a board-wide email and ask for a reply from everybody, unless it's something minor or administrative.
That's right. And I think you actually don't even have to be that specific on the agenda. You could just say that we are going to pitch ideas, kind of thing.
Oh, I just meant for our own organization. That's what I thought you meant, it so that everyone would know what is being pitched before we get to the
So
meeting.
the subtle difference between being able to do the work between the meetings and having something that appears from an outside point of view as an actual meeting that is not held in public is the subtle distinction there. And the absence of an action does make that distinction, and the absence of a quorum also makes that distinction, which is why a reply to all with an action item is something that needs to be publicly posted. Great. Any other questions there? So we're going to do some heavy lifting then. June will be a busy meeting. And with that, let's get to new business. And Maggie, I'll turn it back to you for updates from the Board of Commissioners.
Sure. I don't have a whole lot to add. I know, Sarah, you wanted to talk about cooling stations, which we'll get as part of public participation in a while. We already talked about the drug ordinance, animal animal ordinance, not drug, I'm reading the next topic. We do have a group of citizens that is working to make a drug education for parents about kratom, delta-8 THC, some of these other funky substances like the Amanita gummies and whatnot, so that parents are up to date at identification. We figured the schools hit the children quite well with information, but maybe parents wouldn't have a clue what's going on. So it's a couple of parents that were concerned around the kratom issue, and they're working, and they're going to be working with the Department of Health at the county as far as some accuracy and that sort of thing. But it's really in its just starting phases.
I think that's absolutely excellent. It's great.
I think it's good. It'll help with parenting because, as we discussed, a lot of this is a parenting issue. But if you don't know about it, it's hard to parent appropriately.
On the heat exposure question, I do want to take a moment to thank you, Maggie, for supporting the board and immediately going to the township. And we will continue to have the fan program. We will continue to have this facility available as a cooling station for heat alerts, and the rest I'm going to, as you say, leave for Sarah.
Yeah,
for the
the
public
police do put it on their Facebook page. It will be on the township website as far as this place, and I believe the senior center as well. And we can talk more about it in a minute. The other, and I think the really exciting thing that will be on Monday's agenda, so it hasn't happened yet, and hopefully it won't get pulled, is that we're looking to have a mental health unit join the police force with a social worker and 2 dedicated to that unit police officers that would accompany the social worker on, they'd be close, plain clothes dressed and accompany on calls that potentially need a little more de-escalation and services from a mental health worker, and would provide some follow-up, some liaisoning to appointments, identifying appointments, that sort of thing. So it's really in the early phases, but the funding will be on Monday night's Board of Commissioners agenda.
Have we had problems like that in Radnor Township?
Yes.
The magnitude is significant?
Significant. I tried to get a handle on the numbers, and I just didn't get any from Chief Flanagan. But there have been issues. There have been a lot of domestic violence calls, and there's drug abuse, alcohol abuse everywhere. So these are issues that I think really would be in the venue and purview of a social worker. So.
Speeding past a stopped school bus with red lights flashing? I put that as a mental health problem. Thank you, Maggie. With that,
Sorry, I just wanted.
please.
I had contact from a resident who had a question about, I don't know if you know anything about this, Maggie, but that the county has made some funding available for lead removal, for people who have lead paint, I guess, in some older housing. I don't know specifically where the township's involvement would be with that, and I'm still in contact with that resident. I just didn't know if that was anything you'd heard anything about. I do know that the county has a form which I, will be happy to send you for individual property owners and landlords actually to get to apply for this funding to get it, on an individual property basis. But had you heard anything about it being?
I don't think the
a
township
municipal
really
issue?
has a role,
Okay.
other than in pipes and lead pipe removal, that sort of thing, but not so much in lead paint. And I think the county is actually a good place for it to come, but I would love to see any information you have on it. And I will ask the township folks when I meet on Wednesday. So.
Other comments? Jenny, you have anything for us from the school board?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about a training that we had not too long ago. It's called the Legislative Breakfast, and we invited some of the legislature people to come in. We had a breakfast and talked about student mental health. I guess that's pretty much the only thing that we did that would have to do with this. And we're doing a lot of things with curriculum. I mean, we're, doing a lot of things, a lot of meetings. But when it comes to this particular venue, I think that that would probably be the most appropriate.
Very good, thank you. Anybody else among the board members have new business they would like to raise? Great, then with that, we will open the floor for public participation. Just remind people, public participation is, this is the Board of Health, not the Board of Commissioners, nor the Congress of the United States, and so if you could make it clear when you, we will not address comments from public participation here, but subsequent follow-up as needed. And if you can make it clear what it is that you are asking from us when you make a presentation, that would be exceedingly helpful.
My name is Kathy Wright. I live in Ward 1, and at several meetings ago, Sarah Pilling brought up the cooling station. And I am a nurse, and I belong to the Radnor League of Women Voters. So we discussed it at one of our meetings. Jillian is our president, and so I then am a member of the Delaware County League of Women Voters Health Committee. And so we discussed it in one of our huddles several months ago. And our president is Dr. Nancy Schwartz-Hapko, and she's a Villanova emeritus. I'm sure all of you know her name. Anyway, she took it upon herself to draft a letter that's going to go to the county council and Director Ryan, and I was going to read you that letter, that's all. And I'd be more than happy to email it to anyone who wants, because there are some sites in here that someone might want to look at. Dear Director Ryan and council representatives, I'm writing on behalf of the Delaware County League of Women Voters Health Committee. Climate change is bringing rising average temperatures and more days of extreme heat with reduced nighttime cooling. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration reported in the 2000s the temperatures in Pennsylvania have been higher than in any other historic period. Of particular note, the number of warm nights has increased, offering less relief from extreme heat for vulnerable populations who do not have access to air conditioning. Heat-related illnesses such as heat stroke, heat exhaustion, heat cramps, heat rash occur when the body is unable to cool itself. Extreme heat can result in death and is the leading cause of mortality from climate change. Particularly vulnerable populations include older adults, children, and people with certain health conditions, including the inability to sweat or cardiac and pulmonary disease, outdoor workers, and low-income people. According to the CDC, in 2020, the latest year for which data has been aggregated, 18 Pennsylvanians died as a result of extreme heat. During health emergencies, many municipalities open cooling centers in public spaces such as libraries, community and senior centers, schools, and malls. Shaded parks, pools, and spray grounds also offer respite from the heat. Cooling centers in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in 2023 have been identified by the National Center for Health Housing, and then there's a website that can be seen. We know that across our country, even in our wealthier communities, but particularly in communities with lower average household incomes, some residents do not have access to air conditioning. The Delaware County League of Women Voters Health Committee is writing to urge Delaware County Health Department to take leadership in encouraging municipalities to designate cooling centers to be open during heat health emergencies with transportation support and create a county-wide communication plan for the public about this issue. And then all of our members are signing the letter.
Thank you. I think it'd be great if we incorporated that into the minutes of the meeting and made that available. So thank you for bringing that up.
You're welcome.
I have a copy of the letter for you.
Just so you know, I tried the link that you mentioned that shows all the centers, and it didn't work. And someone else tried it, and it didn't work. So you might, before she sends that out, you might want to have her check that link.
It did on mine, so.
Oh, interesting. Well, it may be that I got it forwarded, a couple of times.
Please.
Same subject. Is this on? Okay, yeah. Good evening. My name is Jillian Norris Santo, 424 Inverary Road in Villanova. And as Ms. Wright mentioned, she and I are both active in the Radnor League of Women Voters. I'm president, and for many years, for quite some time, Kathy has been, in addition to being a very active member, our liaison to this Board of Health and to the Delco Health Department, and before that, when it was in its planning stages. So she's very experienced. And I just want to follow on and add a bit to what she said. I want to comment on the same issue, the excessive heat issue, which is likely to be a health hazard again this summer. And I just would add something to all of this, that it's very encouraging that just a few weeks ago on April 24th, the Radnor Board of Commissioners adopted a resolution, as you probably know. I think it was extremely important. They officially adopted a resolution by the governing body for the Radnor Township, the 2023 Delaware County Hazard Mitigation Plan. It's hereby adopted as the official hazard mitigation plan of Radnor Township, and the respective officials and agencies identified in the implementation strategy of this Delaware County Hazard Mitigation Plan are hereby directed to execute the recommended activities assigned to them. When you go to the website and go to the Delco website and actually look at the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan, you get a lot of extremely useful information. And among all of the hazards that they list, and of course the list is very long, there's a 15-page survey, which I certainly recommend people fill out. There's so many hazards. It goes everything from flooding to drought. And the hazards are both natural and man-made. And on the whole list, we do have this list of disasters. We have the phrase extreme temperatures. That is one of the hazards that they are going to officially address, and they want resident inputs on that. So I feel this dovetails with what Dr. Schartz-Hopko has just written and with what Kathy has read, because it looks as if our commissioners and our township and our county are sort of moving in the same direction, and I think we just have to keep the pressure on so that the hazard of extreme temperatures just doesn't become forgotten, but that it can come to the fore as one of the key parts of risk mitigation. So that's what I wanted to add. Thank you. Oh, I do recommend you just go to the website. It's, Delco Hazard Mitigation Plan. It's very easy to find, and the survey is very good. It's for households so that people can figure out if they're protected from hazards, what hazards, and they also want to know what hazards concern you the most, and they have a whole list. You not at all concerned to extremely concerned on whatever it is, flooding, climate change, oil leaks, and so forth. So I think that really is quite a plus. Thanks.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing.
They said it all.
Any other comments from public participation? I think we all agree that the effects of changes in our weather and our climate are worthy of our attention. Anybody else have any comments? With that, we've completed our agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
With that, the meeting is adjourned.